The most vulgar Golden Age Hollywood actresses. The glamorous image of old Hollywood often evokes elegance and sophistication, stars draped in diamonds, speaking in refined tones, and embodying the height of class. But behind this carefully constructed facade existed a world where many of cinema's most beloved actresses defied the strict moral codes of their era with colorful language, bawdy humor, and behavior that would shock the carefully crafted public image the studios worked so hard to maintain. Before we dive into this overlooked chapter of film history, let's acknowledge something important. The term vulgar has meant different things in different eras. What might have scandalized audiences in the 1930s would hardly raise an eyebrow today. Yet within the rigidly controlled studio system, where morality clauses dictated public behavior and women faced especially strict standards, these actresses' willingness to speak their minds, use colorful language, or challenge sexual taboos represented genuine rebellion. What you're about to discover isn't just scandalous entertainment, though there's plenty of that. These stories reveal how beneath Hollywood's polished veneer, many of its greatest female stars were far more complex, outspoken, and authentic than their carefully sanitized public images suggested. From the sharp-tongued wit of pre-code stars to the backstage profanity of screen goddesses, these women often saved their most memorable lines for when the cameras stopped rolling. Some of these accounts come from well-documented sources like memoirs and interviews, while others circulated as persistent Hollywood legend. We'll be clear about which is which, but all of them challenge our sanitized vision of Golden Age actresses and remind us that behind many of cinema's most iconic performances were women who refused to be as constrained off-screen as their characters often were on-screen. So prepare for a journey into the less refined side of Hollywood history as we explore 20 Golden Age actresses whose colorful language and behavior would have sent the studio publicity departments into damage control mode. Number 1. Mae West, the original queen of innuendo. This next star didn't just push boundaries, she steamrolled right over them, causing such a scandal that she literally changed the course of film censorship. Mae West wasn't just risque for her era, she was so provocative that her films partially triggered the strict enforcement of the Hays Code that would censor Hollywood for decades. West's notorious double entendres and sexual innuendos made her a vaudeville star before she arrived in Hollywood, at the remarkably late age of 38, already fully formed as a boundary-pushing performer. West's vulgar reputation is perhaps the most thoroughly documented on our list. Her famous lines, "Is that a pistol in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" And "When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better," shocked 1930s audiences while making her one of Paramount's highest-paid stars. What many don't realize is that West wrote much of her own material, including her most suggestive dialogue. Behind the scenes, West's language was even more colorful. Director Henry Hathaway recalled that during filming of Every Day's a Holiday, West responded to a complex camera setup by declaring, "Hell, honey, if I wanted to be photographed that way, I'd work in a f***ing gynecologist's office." This quip reportedly left the crew simultaneously shocked and struggling not to laugh. What makes West's vulgarity particularly significant is that it wasn't just for shock value. It was a deliberate feminist statement. As film historian Janine Bassinger noted, Mae West's sexual humor gave her power in an era when women had very little. She wasn't being objectified, she was doing the objectifying. West's off-screen behavior matched her screen persona. She was notorious for propositioning attractive male extras and making explicit comments about their physical attributes. George Raft, her co-star in Night After Night, claimed that West once evaluated a muscular young actor by announcing to the entire set, "I could break that boy in half like a stale breadstick and have him begging for more." Most shockingly for the era, West maintained relationships with many African-American boxers and musicians, at a time when interracial relationships weren't just taboo, but illegal in many states. When reportedly confronted about this by a Paramount executive, West responded with a line too explicit to print even by today's standards, essentially suggesting that her bedroom choices were none of the studio's business. West's vulgarity was so fundamental to her appeal that when the Hays Code enforcement finally forced her to clean up her act in later films, her career suffered irreparably. As West herself put it, "I believe in censorship. I made a fortune out of it." That fortune came from being the most deliberately, strategically vulgar actress of Hollywood's golden age. Number 2. Tallulah Bankhead, the aristocrat with the sailor's vocabulary. The next star combined Southern aristocratic heritage with some of the most shocking behavior and language in Hollywood history, famously declaring she was pure as the driven slush. Tallulah Bankhead, descended from a prominent political family, her father and grandfather were U.S. congressmen, developed a reputation for outrageous behavior and extremely profane language that stood in stark contrast to her refined background. While many actresses carefully crafted respectable public personas, Bankhead seemed to delight in shocking both colleagues and the public. Bankhead's vulgarity is exceptionally well documented through multiple reliable sources. Director Alfred Hitchcock, not easily scandalized, reportedly said working with Bankhead on Lifeboat, 1944, was an interesting experience that I don't care to repeat. On the set of that film, Bankhead reportedly caused a stir by refusing to wear underwear during scenes filming up the ladder to the lifeboat. When the wardrobe department raised concerns about potential indecency, Bankhead famously replied, "Darling, that's between me and the public." Bankhead's profanity was legendary, even in an industry not known for delicate language. Actor John Emery once remarked that Tallulah could make a sailor blush. Her standard greeting, "Hello, darling," was often followed by strings of expletives delivered in her distinctive throaty drawl. Playwright Thornton Wilder noted that Bankhead had the smallest vocabulary and the largest collection of four-letter words in the English-speaking theater. What makes Bankhead's vulgarity particularly noteworthy is that unlike many stars who maintained one image publicly and another privately, she made almost no concessions to propriety in any setting. At a formal dinner, at producer David O. Selznick's home, when conversation turned to politics, Bankhead reportedly silenced the table by declaring, "I'm a Democrat because I believe in helping the poor, darling, and I'm a libertine because I believe in helping myself to the rich." Bankhead's sexual frankness was equally shocking for her era. She openly discussed her bisexuality, claiming to have had affairs with many Hollywood notables of both genders. When asked about rumors regarding her relationship with actress Eva Le Gallienne, Bankhead reportedly responded, "Darling, I've had men, I've had women, and I've had good whiskey. And I prefer good whiskey, but one makes do." Despite her shocking language and behavior, Bankhead maintained her career largely because she was a genuine talent and came from a powerful family. As she herself once quipped, "They can't fire me. My family's too rich, and I'm too famous." This freedom allowed her to push boundaries that other actresses of her era couldn't risk crossing. When watching Bankhead's relatively few film performances, particularly Lifeboat, viewers are seeing only the carefully edited version of an actress whose most memorable lines and behaviors occurred when the cameras weren't rolling. A woman who refused to be constrained by the strict behavioral codes imposed on women in her era. Number 3. Bette Davis, the queen of the cutting remark. This two-time Oscar winner didn't just play intimidating women on screen. Her legendary sharp tongue and willingness to speak her mind made her equally formidable off-screen. Bette Davis, known for iconic performances in films like All About Eve and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, when Crawford died, Davis allegedly remarked, "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." Unlike many stars whose off-screen personalities contrasted with their roles, Davis's real-life reputation for blunt speech and colorful language matched, and sometimes exceeded, her on-screen persona. Davis's vulgarity took the form of scathing wit rather than mere profanity. Her cutting remarks about colleagues are well documented in multiple reliable sources. Of her frequent co-star and rival Joan Crawford, Davis famously said, "The best time I ever had with Joan Crawford was when I pushed her down the stairs in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane." When Crawford died, Davis allegedly remarked, "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." What makes Davis's vulgarity particularly significant is that it represented a direct challenge to the studio system's control over actresses. When Warner Brothers tried to force her into roles she considered beneath her talents, Davis not only fought back legally, but publicly criticized studio head Jack Warner in unusually explicit terms for the era. When asked about Warner during her contract battle, Davis reportedly said, "I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire." Shocking language from a leading lady in the 1930s. Davis's straightforward approach to sexuality also defied the demure image expected of actresses in her era. When asked by a young actress actress how she had prepared for a love scene, Davis reportedly replied, "Darling, I just slip my hand inside my knickers and think of the Bank of England." This practical, unromanticized view of performing intimate scenes horrified publicity departments trying to maintain the illusion of stars' perpetual virtue. Unlike some stars who mellowed with age, Davis became more outspoken as her career progressed. During a 1987 television interview with Johnny Carson, when asked about her contemporary actresses, Davis shocking the audience by declaring that Faye Dunaway was a real CT, using perhaps the most taboo word in American English on national television. Director William Wyler, who worked with Davis on several films, including her Oscar-winning performance in Jezebel, once commented, "Betty has the vocabulary of a truck driver and the soul of a poet. Sometimes both emerge in the same sentence." This combination of refinement and rawness defined both Davis's screen persona and her off-screen reputation. When watching Davis's performances, particularly in roles like Margot Channing in All About Eve, viewers are seeing an actress whose sharp-tongued screen characters reflected aspects of her authentic self, a woman who refused to soften her edges to meet Hollywood's expectations of feminine behavior. We've encountered stars who shocked with sexual innuendo, profane language, and cutting remarks. But the stories are about to get even more surprising. From actresses who propositioned their co-stars in shockingly explicit terms to those who used four-letter words in front of studio executives, the next batch of stars reminds us that Hollywood's feminine icons weren't always as ladylike as their carefully constructed images suggested. In fact, some of the most elegant women on screen saved their most colorful expressions for when the cameras stopped rolling. Number 4. Carole Lombard, the elegant comedienne with truck driver language. This next star combined ethereal beauty with a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush, creating a contrast that both shocked and delighted her colleagues. Carole Lombard, the luminous blonde comedienne who starred in classics like My Man Godfrey and To Be or Not to Be, projected an image of sophisticated glamour on screen. Off-screen, however, Lombard was known throughout Hollywood for her extraordinarily profane language, which stood in stark contrast to her elegant appearance. Lombard's colorful vocabulary is one of the most well-documented cases on our list. Director Mitchell Leisen once remarked, "Carole could swear like no woman I've ever heard. She'd string together combinations of words that would leave a room full of Marines pale." Her husband, Clark Gable, reportedly said that one of the things that attracted him to Lombard was that she swears better than I do. What made Lombard's vulgarity particularly noteworthy was how she deployed it strategically. Unlike some stars whose profanity reflected genuine anger or frustration, Lombard often used shocking language playfully to disarm colleagues and create a relaxed atmosphere on set. Director Howard Hawks recalled that during tense moments filming 20th Century, Lombard would break the tension with a string of obscenities that had everyone laughing too hard to stay upset. Perhaps the most famous example of Lombard's colorful language came during a formal dinner at producer David O. Selznick's home. When conversation lagged, Lombard reportedly stood, raised her glass, and delivered a toast so profane and anatomically explicit that Selznick's wife, Irene, left the table in tears. Yet rather than damaging Lombard's reputation, the incident became a beloved Hollywood anecdote about her unfiltered authenticity. Lombard's willingness to use explicit language extended to her interactions with studio executives, a particularly bold choice for an actress in the studio era. When Paramount attempted to cast her in a film she considered beneath her talents, Lombard allegedly told a stunned production meeting, "I won't do it. The screenplay is ST, the director is a hack, and you can go FK yourselves." She then negotiated a better project and a significant raise. What makes Lombard's case particularly interesting is that her vulgarity coexisted with genuine sophistication and intelligence. Alfred Hitchcock, who briefly worked with Lombard, noted that she had the mouth of a dock worker and the mind of a scholar, a combination he found utterly refreshing in an industry of manufactured personalities. When watching Lombard's sophisticated comedic performances, particularly her work in the screwball genre, viewers are witnessing an actress whose off-screen frankness informed her ability to bring authentic energy to even the most artificial scenarios. A woman whose private boldness enhanced her public artistry. Unlike stars who melted down when things went wrong, Stanwyck's vulgarity often emerged in moments of camaraderie. Frank Capra recalled that after successful takes on Meet John Doe, Stanwyck would sometimes express her satisfaction with colorful phrases learned in her youth, language so explicit that he refused to repeat it even decades later. But coming from Barbara, he noted, somehow it just sounded like enthusiasm. What's particularly notable about Stanwyck is that her occasional vulgarity never damaged her professional reputation. She was known as one of the most professional, prepared, and respected actresses in Hollywood. This suggests that her authentic nature, even when it included colorful language, was valued more highly than artificial refinement would have been. When watching Stanwyck's performances, particularly in films where she played working-class characters like Stella Dallas, viewers are seeing an actress whose understanding of those roles was informed by genuine experience, a star who succeeded not by completely transforming herself, but by bringing her authentic background to her art. Number 7. Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde with the blue vocabulary. This sex symbol's innocent screen image contrasted dramatically with her behind-the-scenes reputation for shockingly explicit language that made even hardened studio executives blush. Jean Harlow, the original platinum blonde, who starred in pre-code classics like Red Dust and Dinner at 8, cultivated a screen image that combined sex appeal with a certain childlike innocence. Off-screen, however, Harlow was known throughout Hollywood for language so explicitly vulgar that it shocked even in an industry not known for delicacy. Harlow's profane vocabulary is well documented through multiple reliable sources. Director Victor Fleming, who worked with Harlow on Red Dust, recalled that Jean had the face of an angel and the mouth of a truck driver. The contrast was both shocking and somehow endearing. Unlike some actresses who reserved colorful language for private settings, Harlow seemed unconcerned about who might overhear her explicit expressions. What makes Harlow's vulgarity particularly noteworthy is how it contrasted with her carefully crafted screen persona. MGM publicity materials presented Harlow as sexy but sweet, a good girl, despite her provocative appearance. The real Harlow, however, freely used language that would never have passed the censors in her films. When a reporter once asked about her platinum hair color, Harlow reportedly responded with an anatomically explicit joke so shocking that it couldn't be printed even in the scandal sheets of the era. Harlow's comfort with profanity reflected her unusual upbringing. Raised by a mother who pushed her into acting from a young age, Harlow spent much of her youth around adults in the entertainment industry rather than with children her own age. As co-star Marie Dressler observed, Jean speaks like someone who learned language from stagehands rather than school teachers. Unlike some stars who became more cautious as their fame increased, Harlow seemed unconcerned about maintaining pretenses. During filming of Bombshell, when director Victor Fleming suggested she tone down her language because it might damage her reputation, Harlow allegedly replied, "If they don't like my f***ing language, they can fire my f***ing ass. There are worse things than going back to in Kansas City." Her frankness both shocked and amused her colleagues. Perhaps the most famous example of Harlow's colorful language came during filming of Hell's Angels, when director Howard Hughes repeatedly demanded additional takes of a difficult scene. After the 27th take, an exasperated Harlow reportedly shouted, "For Christ's sake, Howard, I've said the same f***ing line the same f***ing way 27 f***ing times. What the f***k do you want?" Hughes, not easily shocked, was reportedly speechless. When watching Harlow's performances, particularly in pre-code films where her characters pushed contemporary boundaries of acceptable female behavior, viewers might consider how her off-screen frankness informed these roles, a woman whose authentic lack of pretense contributed to her unique screen presence. Number 8. Marlene Dietrich, the international star who shocked in multiple languages. This next icon's sophisticated European image masked a woman who could curse fluently in 4 languages and shocked Hollywood with her explicitly bisexual pursuits. Marlene Dietrich, the German-born star of classics like Morocco and The Blue Angel, projected an image of continental sophistication that made her exotic to American audiences. Behind this carefully crafted persona, however, Dietrich was known for both colorful language and boundary-pushing behavior that challenged Hollywood's moral standards. Dietrich's vulgarity is well documented through multiple reliable sources, including her own daughter, Maria Riva's revealing memoir. What distinguished Dietrich from many contemporaries was her multilingual profanity. She could swear fluently in German, French, English, and Russian, often combining all 4 languages into what director Billy Wilder called symphonies of international vulgarity. What makes Dietrich's case particularly interesting is how her European background gave her certain immunities from American moral expectations. Studio publicists could dismiss her occasional public profanity as European sophistication, while similar language from American-born actresses might have created scandals. As Dietrich herself reportedly said, Americans expect Germans to be either brutally efficient or decadently vulgar. I chose the latter because it's more fun. Dietrich's explicit discussions of sexuality particularly shocked Hollywood contemporaries. At a time when most actresses pretended romantic scenes were technical challenges rather than potentially pleasurable experiences, Dietrich openly evaluated her leading men in crudely physical terms. After filming with John Wayne, Dietrich reportedly told a stunned interviewer, "He's built like a tree trunk everywhere." Such explicit comments were almost unprecedented from female stars of the era. Beyond language, Dietrich's open bisexuality and frank pursuit of both male and female lovers defied the strict moral codes governing stars' behavior. When Josef von Sternberg, her frequent director and former lover, questioned her about rumors regarding her relationship with actress Mercedes d'Acosta, Dietrich allegedly replied, "I can get along with men. I can get along with women. What the business is it of yours which I prefer on Tuesdays?" Dietrich's vulgarity extended to her professional relationships. Unlike stars who reserve their most colorful language for private settings, Dietrich would sometimes deploy explicit terms in professional disagreements. When producer David O. Selznick suggested script changes that would have reduced her role, Dietrich reportedly responded with an anatomically impossible suggestion delivered in 4 languages, culminating in English with, "and the horse you rode in." When watching Dietrich's performances, particularly her sexually ambiguous roles in films like Morocco, where she famously kisses another woman, viewers are seeing an actress whose boundary-pushing screen moments reflected aspects of her authentic self, a European artist who never fully accepted the puritanical constraints of the American studio system. Number 9. Betty Hutton, the energetic performer with the shocking vocabulary. Behind this wholesome musical star's boundless on-screen energy lurked a woman whose explosive profanity matched her explosive performances, shocking colleagues who expected her to match her innocent screen image. Betty Hutton, the energetic blonde star of musicals like Annie, Get Your Gun and The Perils of Pauline, projected an image of wholesome, all-American enthusiasm in her films. Off-screen, however, Hutton was known throughout Hollywood for a vocabulary that could peel paint off walls, creating a stark contrast with her carefully crafted public persona. Hutton's surprisingly vulgar language is documented through multiple reliable sources. Bob Hope, who co-starred with Hutton in several films, once remarked, "Betty's like a firecracker, explosive on screen and even more explosive off-screen, especially when it comes to her choice of words." Unlike some stars who deployed profanity strategically or playfully, Hutton's colorful language often emerged from her naturally uninhibited personality and struggles with emotional regulation. What makes Hutton's vulgarity particularly noteworthy is how dramatically it contrasted with her girl-next-door screen image. Paramount publicity materials presented Hutton as the embodiment of wholesome American enthusiasm, a persona that bore little resemblance to the sometimes volatile woman behind the scenes. Director Mitchell Lyson recalled that during filming of The Perils of Pauline, Hutton responded to a difficult stunt request with a string of profanity that went on for nearly 2 minutes without repeating a single phrase. It was almost poetic in its thoroughness. Hutton's comfort with explicit language reflected her difficult upbringing. Raised in poverty by a single mother who struggled with alcoholism, Hutton began performing in speakeasies as a child, environments where refined language was hardly the norm. As columnist Hedda Hopper observed, though in more delicate terms, Betty speaks like someone who learned language in places young ladies aren't supposed to visit. Unlike stars who became more cautious as their fame increased, Hutton's explosive nature, including her language, became more pronounced as she struggled with the pressures of stardom. During production of Annie, Get Your Gun, a role she inherited after Judy Garland was fired, Hutton's frustration with the difficult shoot reportedly culminated in a profanity-laden tirade directed at producer Arthur Freed that became legendary at MGM for both its duration and creativity. Perhaps the most famous example of Hutton's colorful language came during a live radio interview in the early 1950s. When the host asked about her boundless energy, Hutton began to respond, but tripped over a cable and dropped a word that was decidedly not approved for broadcast. Rather than apologizing, Hutton reportedly laughed and added several more explicit terms before the program could cut to a commercial break. When watching Hutton's high-energy performances, particularly in films where she literally throws herself into physical comedy, viewers might consider how her off-screen lack of inhibition informed these roles. A woman whose authentic emotional intensity contributed to both her greatest performances and her personal struggles. These stories of Hollywood's most colorfully outspoken actresses reveal much more than just scandalous anecdotes. They offer unique insights into both the rigid control of the studio system and the complex women who navigated it. Behind these accounts of shocking language and behavior lies a more nuanced reality about gender, power, and authentic self-expression in an era of carefully manufactured star images. First, it's crucial to understand that the studio system imposed particularly strict standards on actresses. While male stars like Humphrey Bogart or John Barrymore could cultivate somewhat roguish public images, women in Hollywood operated under much narrower constraints. The idealized femininity promoted in fan magazines and publicity materials allowed for very little authentic personality, especially personalities that included profanity, sexual frankness, or challenging behavior. Against this backdrop of rigid gender expectations, the vulgarity of these actresses takes on deeper significance. For women like Barbara Stanwyck or Tallulah Bankhead, explicit language wasn't just about shock value, it represented a refusal to be confined by artificial standards of ladylike behavior. Their colorful expressions served as declarations of autonomy in a system designed to control every aspect of their public personas. The stark contrast between public image and private reality also highlights the psychological complexity of stardom itself. Actresses like Joan Crawford and Betty Hutton maintained spotless public images while privately expressing themselves in much less refined terms. This duality reveals the emotional toll of maintaining idealized personas, the pressure cooker effect that sometimes resulted in explosive private behavior from women expected to appear perfect at all times. Perhaps most significantly, these vulgar moments humanize figures we've elevated to mythical status. The knowledge that Carole Lombard could outswear a sailor, or that Jean Harlow shocked even hardened film crews. With her explicit language doesn't diminish their achievements. It reminds us that even the most luminous stars were complex, contradictory human beings, rather than the one-dimensional ideals presented in studio publicity. While some of these accounts undoubtedly grew in the telling, Hollywood has always loved stories that puncture glamorous facades. Many are documented in multiple reliable sources. They offer a necessary counterbalance to the sanitized histories that studio publicity departments constructed and that nostalgic retrospectives often perpetuate. For modern fans of classic cinema, these stories provide a more complete picture of beloved performers. Understanding that Mae West deliberately used sexual language as a form of feminist rebellion, or that Bette Davis's sharp-tongued screen characters reflected aspects of her authentic self, adds texture to our appreciation of their work. These accounts also illuminate the extraordinary pressure Golden Age actresses faced to maintain impossible standards of feminine perfection. When Marlene Dietrich openly discussed her sexuality in explicit terms, or when Barbara Stanwyck refused to adopt refined speech patterns that weren't authentically hers, they were pushing back against a system that demanded women be simultaneously desirable yet pure, sophisticated yet innocent. Impossible contradictions that real women could never embody. In many ways, these vulgar moments represent small acts of rebellion against the dehumanizing aspects of stardom. Glimpses of authentic humanity breaking through carefully constructed images in an industry that valued artifice over reality, especially for its female performers. Mae West's innuendos, Tallulah Bankhead's shocking frankness, Barbara Stanwyck's refusal to put on airs. These weren't just colorful anecdotes, but windows into the complex women behind the perfectly lit images we've treasured for generations. The next time you watch a classic Hollywood film, consider the unwritten stories behind those flawless performances. When Joan Crawford appears immaculately poised in every